Today's episode is brought to you by FreedomProject Academy. Looking for a K-12 classical online school built on Judeo-Christian values? FPA is enrolling now for the fall. Request your free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.
It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. Before we get started, please hit that share button so we can educate more patriots all around the country. Today, we start with student loan debt, as Joe Biden says, despite a sinking economy, rising interest rates, soaring inflation, U.S. taxpayers should now pay off more college loan debt for millions of Americans who took out loans, this one set of loans, right? We're going to give them back because why? Because his entire demographic now, apparently, Joe Biden, is college graduate women. That's exactly why. Try to make that one last constituency of yours happy, Joe, because no one seems ready to vote for you again.
Well, it's quite interesting because, yes, it is already apparently election time for 2024, so Joe Biden's doing all he can to appease someone, and it is going to, at this point, be the college-educated women, not me, who are interested in what he has to say. And so what do they all have, college-educated women? More than likely, they all have loan debt. And so this past week, there's been the rumblings and talkings of, well, is he going to fulfill his campaign promise that he is going to cancel college loan debt because Elizabeth Warren says he needs to? And, you know, we have AOC, Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who says, obviously, we need to cancel loan debt. And, oh, yes, we have good old Pramila Jayapal, who says that student debt cancellation is racial justice. Student debt cancellation is gender justice. And student debt cancellation is economic justice. Yes.
See, what a fake syllogism. Take a look at that again. Look at her tweet there, like she's proving something syllogistically. It's just stupid assertions. Student debt cancellation is racial justice. How? When the majority of debt holders are white people. Explain to me how that equals racial justice, number one. Number two, given that there are a significant number of men who also going to get their debt, lots of toxic men will get their debts canceled. Is that gender justice? And finally, student debt cancellation is economic justice. Okay, let me see. $1.6 trillion given out by the federal government will not be repaid now because a bunch of whiny, muley little people who got degrees in stupid subjects and took out tens of millions of dollars in loans to do it, don't want to pay it back. That's called economic justice. No, I think that's called default.
So why everyone got all excited about the fact that maybe some of this debt loan would be forgiven is that President Biden was in a meeting with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and he basically confirmed that they're exploring some executive action about canceling student loan debt. Now, initially, Representative Tony Cardenas, who's from California, talked to CBS News and said that, Biden at the meeting saying that the caucus had supported canceling $10,000 of student loan debt per borrower. And in response, Cardenas explained the president kind of just said, he smiled and said, you're going to like what I do on that. I'm looking to do something on that, and I think you're going to like what I do. I love his word salads. It's almost as good as his vice president's word salad.
Isn't that his code word for his diaper needs changing?
It might be. So what happened was people were like, oh, tell me more. And so people were questioning Biden. Reporters were questioning, like, you kind of talked about this loan debt, maybe like 10,000. We're throwing numbers out there. And then it was, $50,000, because that had been promised at one time. And so then when President Biden, after he was done speaking about Ukraine and giving them $33 billion, then it was a matter of, by the way, Mr. President, how much are you willing to give college students to pay off their loans?
The first thing we did was reform the system that was in place that didn't work for anybody, that allowed people to write off debt if they engaged in public service. We have almost 1,785,000, don't hold me the exact number, I'll get the number, 700 and some thousand have had debt forgiven, their whole debt forgiven because of their work, working in either as teachers or other means by which they qualify. And we continue to make that easier. Secondly, I am considering dealing with some debt reduction. I am not considering $50,000 debt reduction, but I'm in the process of taking a hard look at whether or not there will be additional debt forgiveness, and I'll have an answer on that in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, so darn it. I mean, you promised you were going to cancel all this, but then you're kind of backtracking because you don't really know what's going on, and don't quote me on this, but there's 700 and some thousand who have already had their debt forgiven because of public service, but we're going to give some debt, but no, it's not going to be that 50,000 like I said I was going to give you. So he's just as confused as you are, or maybe more.
Yes, and confusion is a hallmark of this particular administration. We find out even moving forward in the story. It never gets old with the Biden administration. Biden already extended student loan repayment moratoriums earlier this month, all the way through August 31st. So no one's even paying any interest. No one's passed. It's all suspended now, right? All that money could be helping this crashing economy. No, that's okay. You leave it sit where it is. The freeze was expected to end on May 1st. Didn't happen. Progressive Democrats are still not satisfied. A group of House Democrats sent a letter to Biden in March asking him to extend the pause through the end of this year. And Massachusetts Democrat Senator Elizabeth Warren left the reservation, insisting that Biden has the authority to forgive more than $1.6 trillion with a wave of a pen. It's obvious that Dances with Morons hasn't read the Constitution any more than Biden would probably be capable of reading it at this point.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your app store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
Since we mentioned Elizabeth Warren in the last segment and we talked about President Biden, you know what they have in common other than being woo-hoo is that they were both professors, especially Joe Biden. If you saw one of his recent clips, go look it up. Professor Biden, as he called himself. We have a professor in this instance who maybe would agree with what Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden say on many a topic, including the fact that you must stop all grading of work because, you know, if you grade someone's work, it does perpetuate inequity. This is coming from Dr. Elizabeth Gruner, who's, oh, shocker, an English professor at the University of Richmond. And she recently wrote an op-ed for The Conversation last month, and this is what it began. This is how it started. I've been teaching college English for more than 30 years. Sounds like someone we have in this room currently. 4 years ago, I stopped putting grades on written work, and it has transformed my teaching and my students' learning. My only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. So she goes on to explain in her op-ed about the history of American grading and how having a grading system is demotivating for a lot of students. And then she said what she uses is a method called ungrading. So no graded work throughout the entire course of the semester. She will write comments on it, as she explained, and then at the very end is when you do a portfolio. She says at the end of the semester, they submit a portfolio of revised work, along with an essay reflecting on and evaluating their learning. Like most people who ungrade, I reserve the right to change the grade that students assign themselves in that evaluation, but I rarely do, and when I do, I raise grades almost as often as I lower them. Dr. Duke Pesta, as a 30-year professor of English, please tell me your method of grading.
Bollocks.
Bollocks is how he grades.
Bollocks on this teacher and this new revolution of equity in grading. Just call it what it is, okay? Quit justifying with all this liberal lip speak from English composition monsters. Let me just make it very clear. One of the things that has destroyed English departments is the rise of composition experts and writing and composition courses. Because what they've done now is they've completely purged the writing classroom of imaginative literature, about any kind of serious writing. And now that in 20 years, 30 years ago, we got rid of the good books from writing seminars. Now, we're going to get rid of grades too.
She did provide her 3 reasons for why she does this style of evaluation. She says, first, I wanted my students to focus on the feedback I provided on their writing. That one I enjoy. I personally would say, yes, I would love for professors to provide more feedback than good. And her 3rd reason, I'll get to the second in a moment, but her 3rd reason, and I admit this is selfish, I hate grading. I love teaching, though, and giving students feedback is teaching. I am happy to do it. Freed from the tyranny of determining a grade, I wrote meaningful comments, suggested improvements, asked questions, and entered into a dialogue with my students that felt more productive, that felt, in short, more like an extension of the classroom. Again, just me speaking, is like I would love, again, if professors would provide meaningful comments so I can learn from it and incorporate that. So the fact that she hates grading, Dr. Duke probably doesn't like grading either, but knowing the comments, that's a good thing. It's where we get in the second point that she makes in this. She says, second, I was concerned with equity. For almost 10 years, I have been studying inclusive pedagogy, which focuses on ensuring that all students have the resources they need to learn. My studies confirmed my sense that sometimes what I was really grading was a student's background. Okay, that's on her.
Yeah,
that's
more
on
exactly.
Her.
That's your problem.
Students with educational privilege came into my classroom already prepared to write A or B papers, while others often had not had the instruction that would enable them to do so.
So understand what we hear here, right? There she gave it away. If you're a good student who's worked hard to learn to write well, that's privilege. And if you're a failing writer, that's racism. She just gave away the game. Do we need to pay any more attention to this moron? She lets you know exactly what she's up to here.
Well, here's how she ends it. Students in introductory classes require a bit more direction in this work than advanced students, but most eventually take the opportunity to revise and reflect. Now, I see students from all backgrounds recognizing their own growth, whatever their starting point. They benefit from my coaching. Now it's coaching, not just teaching, coaching. But perhaps even more from the freedom to decide for themselves what really matters in their reading and writing. And I benefit, too, from the opportunity to help them learn and grow without the tyranny of the grade. And yet,
yes.
She still gives them a grade at the end.
The tyranny of the grade. So how fragile are liberals? A little red A-, a little red C+ on the top of a piece of blank line paper, enough to give you the shivers and the willies. Grow up, grow a pair, and go back to the business of school, because here's a little hint. If you don't have competition and you don't have serious measurables, you don't have education.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
Well, it's time to talk about everyone's favorite teacher union leader. I'll give you one guess as to who it is. That's right, it's Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers and a former history teacher. That's something to note on this one. A former history teacher who just took to MSNBC, where she basically has a reserved parking spot. In case you didn't know, they just pick her up from her hotel. Maybe they, chauffeur her around. Well, she has a permanent spot there on MSNBC, so she can lie and, just do all the things she tends to do, except for care about students in the classroom, because she represents only the teachers who are supposed to be teaching your students, but they aren't, because that's not what they do with the teachers' unions. Well, anyway, she was talking about curriculum transparency, and specifically the transparency laws and parental rights legislation. And so obviously that led her saying that the former Department of Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, you may remember her from when the Trump administration was there, and Betsy DeVos was the current education secretary at the time. Betsy DeVos somehow managed to found Hillsdale College.
The architects of all of this are brazen in their transparency. One of the guys that has created this basically said a couple of weeks ago at the college that Betsy DeVos founded, Hillsdale College. I quote the name of the title of his lecture, Laying Siege to the Institutions. And I'm just going to read you one paragraph of what he said, and you'll get it immediately. To get to universal school choice, you really need to operate from a premise of universal public school distrust. To sow and grow that distrust, you have to create your own narrative frame and have to be brutal and ruthless in pursuing it. So the bottom line is this. They just don't want public schools.
Excuse me. The entire premise of the woke crowd is to lay siege to the institutions, isn't it? Are you not attacking freedom and liberty and the Constitution? Are you not attacking the very foundations of capitalism and free markets? To invasively try to destroy institutions? That's what you're doing on the left. See, I get it, Randy Weingarten. Big lefty institutions like public school with a 50-year track record of declining success and failure. Those are the institutions that we're not allowed to challenge because people like you get $3 and $4 million from your teachers union to support them.
All right, so we have several different issues with that clip of Randy. First off, regarding the Betsy DeVos comment. She said, Hillsdale College was founded by Betsy DeVos, except the Free Will Baptists founded Hillsdale back in 1844, being Michigan Central College before changing the name to Hillsdale. And this is according to the school itself.
You mean Al Gore didn't invent the internet too?
No. That did not happen. Now, Betsy DeVos was born in 1958. I mean, I get it. It's only 114 years after Hillsdale was actually founded, but it is possible. She could be the next Doctor Who. I understand that. So either Betsy DeVos is Doctor Who or Randy Weingarten is just lying out of her back end. But that's what she does, because who Randy Weingarten was talking about was Christopher Rufo, but she wouldn't use his name. She said, that guy. So she's mad at Christopher Rufo, and that's why she went on MSNBC to talk about
you mean one of those guys?
One of those guys.
Yeah.
The speech that Christopher gave at Hillsdale, and she quoted from Rufo's speech, and you heard what she said. Except that's not what Christopher Rufo said. So, I mean, we're just kind of misquoting here. So the former history teacher turned union head doesn't know history or geography or doesn't know how to quote anyone accurately either. Now, here's what Rufo actually said so that you can understand the context. 7 minutes earlier, he said two things. There's a piece that he said, and 7 minutes earlier he said a piece, and then what happened is Randy Weingarten just tried to put it together. So he said, I think you want to create the conditions for fundamental structural change to appropriate some language. For example, school choice. To get universal school choice, you really need to operate from a premise of universal public school distrust, because in order for people to take significant action, they have to feel like they have something at stake. Okay? And then she used pieces of that. And then 7 minutes earlier in his own speech, he had said, you have to create your own frame, your own language, and you have to be ruthless and brutal in pursuit of something good. So basically, Weingarten decided to insert some, to sow and grow that distrust. And she put narrative in her little speech that she claims he said. And then she just decided, we're just going to stitch these quotes together, even though they were minutes apart. We're just going to make up our own thing. So obviously, you see what she tweeted out. To get to universal school choice, you really need to operate from a premise of universal public school distrust. To sow and grow that distrust, you have to create your own narrative frame and have to be brutal and ruthless in pursuing it. You see what she just did there? She actually she laid out for all of us to see exactly, apparently, what the Ministry of Truth now is going to be in charge of trying to figure out. They should have made her the head of the Ministry of Truth, because she's doing exactly what is not supposed to be happening. She's just mixing it all together.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Fiorazo. Well, education is always the primary focus of the Dr. Duke Show. Before we go, let's leave you with some other stories worthy of a comment or two. We start in Washington State, where it is now illegal to use the word marijuana. Nope, not joking. The state just passed legislation that makes the actual word marijuana illegal to use. Why, you ask? Well, it all comes down to systemic racism, you see. Watch this.
Pot, weed, grass, Mary Jane, flower. No shortage of terms to describe cannabis. But Washington State is taking one word officially off the table: marijuana.
The term marijuana itself is pejorative and racist.
Governor Jay Inslee signed the bill that strikes out the word from all state laws, rewording dozens of RCWs, replacing it with the term cannabis instead.
Even though it seems simple because it's just one word, but the reality is we are healing the wrongs that were committed against Black and brown people around cannabis.
Jay Inslee. Well, there you have it. Washington State has single-handedly ended racism in America by adopting the word cannabis as the official term for pot. Another example of lawmakers performing yeoman's work. Now, Duke and Katie, anything to add to this? I mean, this pot cannabis thing?
That's hilarious. Now, I think maybe it's just because they mispronounce it. It's marijuana.
Marijuana.
That's why it is probably deemed racist as marijuana. If they would just pronounce it correctly, we'd be okay with it.
I would like to just simply point out that this is one more war on science, right? The word marijuana is for a long time standing acceptable word for that plant in the botany community. But now you've got to keep all those dozens and dozens of euphemisms. And next, how long before cannabis is going to go?
Well, you thought the problems in the cannabis world were bad. Just wait until you hear about the outrage taking over children's books. You see, some people are up in arms that our friend Matt Walsh is being celebrated once again after his children's book, Johnny the Walrus, hit #1 on Amazon's bestsellers list. The children's book has become a lightning rod for the Rainbow Mafia as it tells the tale of a young boy who pretends to be different animals. So, one day, Johnny is convinced he is a walrus, but ultimately learns that imaginations are just that. Now, this, of course, has set the LGBT on fire with calls for Amazon to boycott the book. In fact, a leaked Zoom call shows that one Amazon employee admitting the company is actively taking measures to impact the problematic book. Watch this.
It's been a very traumatic experience for transgender Amazonians and our transgender customers. They're already aware of this. There are things in the space that are happening. But Johnny the Walrus is one hell of a problem.
Communist policy, right? Censorship on full display. Johnny the Walrus was first released last November by the Daily Wire and has since sold more than 250,000 copies. Finally, we wrap things up with a story dripping in irony. President Biden and his Department of Energy have decided to turn out the light on the incandescent bulb popularized by Thomas Edison. In a world built around saving the environment and energy efficiency, the DOE says regulations requiring all service lamps to produce 45 lumens per watt mean that the tried and true incandescent light bulb can be no more. So based on the new rules, the Biden administration plans to go dark on the groundbreaking invention for good in 2023. All right, Duke and Katie, any bright ideas to share on these two last stories?
Well, the lit bulb is a symbol of an idea, and Joe Biden snuffing out that bulb?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's a broken bulb, if anything, and we could replace quite a few bulbs in that entire administration. I just find it very interesting because I haven't gotten a copy yet of Johnny the Walrus, although I would like to get a copy. If anyone wants to send me a copy, I mean, I'd gladly take it off your hands. The fact that man on the Zoom call said the transgender Amazonians, just saying that out loud makes you stop and wonder what's going on there.
All right, friends, that wraps up this segment. More to come next time.
And that wraps up the show. For all the rest of us at Freedom Project, stay educated, my friends.